Hi, welcome everyone to Bay Nature Talks. My name is Victoria Schlesinger and I am the editor of the magazine and website Bay Nature. We're excited to have you here today, especially if you're new to Bay Nature. If you don't know us, we are an independent, nonprofit media organization. And we've been covering the environment and nature in the San Francisco Bay Area and Northern California for the last 23 years. You can see our latest issue, summer issue that just came out this last week. Here's the print magazine. You can also see everything that is published in the magazine online at baynature.org. It'll be coming out over the coming weeks. Everything there is free, accessible to everybody. And thank you for those of you who have already donated for this talk today. The suggested donation is $20. We depend on donations. Half of our funds come from donations. The cost of subscription does not cover our reporting and efforts like today. So thank you. Today, we're going to be talking about Wild Billions, a new in-depth ongoing reporting project that we're debuting in the summer magazine and online this week. And we're really looking forward to hearing your questions, feedback as we get into this reporting project. But a little bit of housekeeping first. We will be asking you questions and for feedback using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Please don't use that for technical questions. If you're having any problems today, unfortunately, we probably really can't help you with those, but do rest assured that this this is being recorded. We will send everybody who signed up for it a link via email, and we will also post this webinar on the Bay Nature website probably by the end of the week, and it will stay there indefinitely. So if you miss us today, you have not missed this talk altogether. So without further ado, I am really excited to introduce Kate Golden, Bay Nature's digital editor.
Hello.
Welcome. Hi, welcome, Kate. So everybody, Kate Golden is the other senior editor at Bay Nature. She and I sit feet from each other in the Bay Nature headquarters in West Berkeley. She joined Bay Nature last August and has an illustrious background prior to her time at Bay Nature. She has 2 degrees from Bay Area's top university, Stanford, and then a master's degree from UC Berkeley's Graduate School of Journalism. She has studied with Lowell Bergman, an illustrious investigative journalist, and has gone on to do a lot of her own investigative journalism over the years and data-driven journalism, covering environmental issues for Wisconsin Watch, Sierra Magazine, Washington Post, Marketplace, and many other places. Bay Nature is super lucky to have her. Yeah, I'm excited for you all to get to really meet her today.
And thank you, Victoria. And I thought I'd tell you guys about Victoria, who is my boss, who's been at Bay Nature for 8 years. And during that time, she has really dived into some of the Bay Area's most pressing environmental issues, how to prevent mega fires, the unhoused people living in parks. I mean, every environmental issue, like Bay Nature gets there first. And she's made it what the magazine, what it is today, that's known for really tough, fair, deep dive reporting that is also really fun to read. It's what attracted me to it. And magically, she routinely gets some of the area's best reporters and writers to work for us. So that is a magic charm. Pre-Bay Nature, Victoria was herself a magazine writer and editor. She produced ambitious pieces in Harper's Magazine, Mother Jones, Al Jazeera, Audubon. Yeah. So we are also lucky to have Victoria on this.
So today, everybody, particularly those who've been at Bay Nature Talks in the past, this is our panel. Kate and I are going to talk about the reporting we've done for Wild Billions. But before we get into that, we really want to hear from all of you and hear who is here with us today. And we're going to send out a sort of pop-up quiz that you can fill out and just give us a quick overview of who's here with us today, and that'll we'll share those results back with you. And there we go, great. While people are voting, let's see, we're gonna get going on exactly why we are doing this big new project that we've called Wild Billions. Waiting for the audience poll results to come in here.
Oh, should I get going?
Yeah, we'll dive in.
Yeah, sounds good. Victoria, maybe just give us a sense of when you got the first inkling that this would be really, oh wait, we got some results here. Oh, okay. So we have about a third of you are general outdoor enthusiasts. 40% of you are professional in a related field. And then we have a smattering of other folks, like whether you're community group volunteers or environmental educators, government leaders, students, donors. We really have a smattering of everybody that we think of as kind of the core Bay Nature community, and everybody we're like hoping to have interested in this issue. So it's great to have you. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. It's really helpful.
But Victoria, yeah, so talk about when you first, you kind of sprang this on me when you first got this inkling that this would be really important for nature in the Bay Area.
Right. So I've been reporting on the environment and thus climate change for a long time, for like 30 years, the duration of my career. And climate change is obviously the story of our time, of, the global story, the national story, certainly the story of the Bay Area. And since I began reporting on this in the mid-90s, environmentalists and many others have really been saying, like, we've got to address climate change, and been advocating for money, real investment in these issues. And there's been report after report over the years, as I'm sure many of you know, kind of basically laying out, the longer we wait, the more expensive this is going to be. And what I heard last August, when the Inflation Reduction Act was passed into law in August by President Biden, was the environmental community, the national conversation was like, the money has arrived, right? The climate change money that we have been looking for decades has arrived under the guise of these two bills, right? The Inflation Reduction Act, and then also the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which was signed into law in the fall of 2021. So these two bills that have no reference to climate or environment really anywhere in the titles amount to $1 trillion in federal spending, along with tax credits. And while that money goes to a lot of different things, which we will touch on, a significant portion of it goes to green energy and nature-related projects. So kind of following that last summer, and then this March, I was at a talk where GRIST was talking about their reporting on these two bills, and I just thought, Bay Nature has got to get in on this. So I came to Kate and pretty much said, okay, how can Bay Nature figure out, of that $1 trillion, what's coming to the Bay Area, Northern California, for nature-related solutions, right? So we're not even talking about the green energy, we're just talking about nature-related solutions. So, and really my question to you was, okay, what is this data-driven journalism? How do we do this? This is new for me, so.
Yeah, and I I have to admit that I was like, I think much of the general public, like I'm a reasonably well informed person, but my understanding of BIL and IRA were that they were climate money in a by with another name, but it was really like about ramping up your electric vehicles and like subsidizing wind energy projects and things like that. So I think that I was still yet to understand how much of this would go directly to nature. But so with the data journalism question, it's like, when you're dealing with this much money, it's going to be a data project. Traditional journalism is really all about human sources. Data-driven journalism, which has been my specialty, is looking at numbers and spreadsheet and data and documents as this other kind of rich source, and in learning how to interrogate these for answers about how the world works or it doesn't work the way it should. So sometimes we dig up this data, it's like just already out there online. Sometimes we have to get it in records requests, fight for it tooth and nail. And sometimes we, as in this case, partly, we have to collect it ourselves. So I've done all of these kinds of things. And I think that what I've learned over the years is basically a kind of humility about how easy it is to get things wrong, because data is created by people and it's always messy. So like, it's not like a whole lot of math. Usually the actual calculations are quite simple, like percentage change or something. 90% of what you're doing is like cleaning and collecting and like trying to understand what you can and can't say about this data. But the power is that you can summarize it and find these sort of hidden truths that may not be apparent just by talking to people. So my past work, I worked in Wisconsin as an investigative reporter for a long time at the nonprofit Wisconsin Watch. And one of the projects I did was do you guys remember the stimulus from Obama days? That seemed like a whole lot of money at the time. Well, I took like a database of the grant recipients in Wisconsin and cross-referenced it with a database of from the EPA of companies that had violated pollution laws, and found, whoa, the polluter with the most notices of violation in Wisconsin had actually gotten this massive grant and had lied about it, had just sort of omitted that fact on its application for the money. And like in another project, I might like dig into century-old publications to find where these forgotten old coal tar factories, which is how we used to have light, were that, and still were, that were likely still polluting waters across the country. I've done text analysis. I analyzed like 50,000 emails sent to Governor Scott Walker, finding like the one email where someone suggests he try a little false flag operation against the Democrats. So I've done a lot of different kinds of data analysis, and this data is special. It's kind of a new frontier for me. It's not the hugest database. It's not the most complicated by any means, but it is just so much freaking money. And like every row in the database is like this whole world unto itself. So that, I think, will take us a while to actually process, and like what we've done in this project is just the beginning.
Yeah. And I guess I want to say, for longtime Bay Nature readers, I want to acknowledge, this is new for Bay Nature, but we're doing it because this really is a historic moment and unprecedented investment in climate change. And we heard that over and over again as we were reporting from people. And it's also palpably a hopeful moment. You could hear the giddiness in people's voices as we spoke to people at these various federal agencies that are beginning to get the money in Northern California. And you could also hear some panic in their voice, right? And that this is a moment where there is a great deal to be hopeful about. This is an actual opportunity to begin to reduce our CO2 emissions and address climate change, prepare for the future that is unstoppable at this point in terms of the greenhouse gases that have already been emitted. And you know, Bay Nature is doing this because climate change really touches everything that we have ever reported on landscapes, ecosystems, specific species, people, and they are all being touched and will continue to be affected by climate change. So this is really what feels like the story of our time. And we want to shine a spotlight on this money, this opportunity, and the challenges that will come with it. So I see, let's see, we were going to ask, what do you folks now sort of know, where were you when you sort of heard about the legislation getting passed in August? What have you been doing in the subsequent months to get ready for this influx of cash? Let's see. Yeah, okay, we're seeing, okay, from we haven't having a pulse of funding is great, but we need to be doing ongoing stewardship. Sure, yep, understaffed agencies. Oh yeah, we know there are a lot of issues to getting a lot of money, and we will get to that.
Yeah, I think that what we were hearing from people is they're both necessary. Like, we both need a huge pulse of money right now, and we need a huge pulse of money later.
Yeah,
to do stewardship, like as the conservation paradigm kind of shifts.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for responding. And some of these responses that you're giving us, we are going to hold on to. This is our chance to get more feedback about this reporting. So even if we don't talk about it all right now, it's super helpful for us. So we've covered what data journalism is. And now when we decided to take this on, Kate, can you talk a little bit more about how we started to look for this information? Kind of what was, bring everybody up to speed on that.
Yeah. So when you start a data journalism project, the thing is, a lot of it actually does require talking to humans. So you kind of have to proceed, as we did, on two tracks. We start calling everybody we know who might know something about this. And in this case, we're just like, you know, it's basically like the whole Bay Nature suite of sources, like everybody from the Sierra Nevada down to the coast and offshore, and people who are involved in community groups and conservation and like biologists and policymakers and everybody. And then there's the data track where we're trying to read everything we can about these bills and look for data that we can actually use to understand it in a kind of summary way. So usually, like, normally in this kind of thing, I'm looking for, if you guys have ever read Dante, we're looking for the Beatrice. We are looking for this like guide who can take us through the dark underworld of the, you know, federal policy or whatever, and tell us like that somebody is going to know the answer and basically understand the shape of this story. But this was really, really different because in truth, nobody had a handle on all of it. Like, we talked to people who kind of had a handle on one portion of it at a time, because this money spans, like, you know, not just coastlines, which is like forests and like, you know, everything. So when we talked to people, the people that we were expecting to be tracking it, they were saying, you know, we're not even tracking it. And I will say, with an exception for the San Francisco Bay joint venture, which was trying to track it, but they're, you know, the coastline portion of things. So we realized that this whole thing is structured in a way that will be really hard to track. And that also, you know, consequently means that there's no one government watchdog that will be, you know, providing some measure of accountability to taxpayers, because, you know, the money is going across so many different agencies and bureaus. Like, there's a different inspector general for every agency. Like, this is really decentralized. So we're talking to all the human sources, and we're soaking up everything we can online. Online, what we have are the White House has published these guidebooks to IRA and BIL. They're 184 and 459 pages respectively. They are narratives full of like, political posturing as well as actual numbers. So like, good luck summarizing that. And so we start to look for, how do other people make sense of that? There are analyses from like McKinsey, the consulting firm. There are like analyses from other groups. Sometimes it's kind of partisan. It's useful, but we're soaking it all up, but it's not like definitive. So finally, I found some data, which was the White House had actually published these spreadsheets of the pots of money that Congress laid out in these bills. And that data turned out to be, to my surprise, very well maintained and like clean. Good job, Biden administration, on that. We started reading through the data row by row. Like, that's basically what you have to do to start, because you have to get to know it. I mentioned trying to interrogate the data. That is what we're doing. So you treat it like a source. And what we realized as we read, that we would have to make some pretty hard editorial choices about what to include, because there's like 450 some pots of money in these two bills. It's just too much for a little organization like us to cover. And there is a lot of stuff that doesn't really fit under the Bay Nature's kind of traditional coverage areas. And there are areas that we would love to get into. We just don't have the resources, like air pollution. So we made some editorial choices. It's very subjective. And, realizing that we're taking this subset of the bills kind of affects how we talk about that later on. It affects the kinds of like statements we can make about it later on, because, we've kind of cherry picked some of the pots of money to look at. And the fine print is really important. Who's eligible for these funds? So this is an example of how the two kind of reporting tracks help us. You've got like all of this money for the Department of Transportation that goes into infrastructure, especially like mostly in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And like, do we include that in our stuff or not? Like, what experts told us is that it really depends on how the Department of Transportation defines those funds, like how they define the programs that they create to spend those funds. And like, they basically could use that money in a way that like aligns with climate priorities, that makes green infrastructure and addresses sea level rise and stuff like that. Or they can just build like, old gray highways the same old way that they used to, and it'll basically be the same. So that kind of discretion is really important. So we drew the line basically looking at traditional kind of Bay Nature coverage areas. We're looking at wildlife and ecosystems, like the direct impact on nature, fire, invasives, yes, biodiversity, somebody asked about that, ecological restoration. We did not include air pollution and drinking water, although maybe we will partner with someone who can report on that. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously extremely important to people. So the next step is to take this kind of the data that we've collected, and I just like pull it into this program that allows me to visualize it in lots of different ways. I make lots and lots of different charts, and I look at everything that I can. I'm trying to figure out like, what are the outliers? Like, which agencies are getting the most money? What's bigger, BIL or IRA? Like, I really want to just kind of make myself one with the data. How much of the bill is stuff we care about? How messy or clean is it? What kinds of stories might we be able to pull from this? It's kind of an inductive process rather than deductive. It's like, it's kind of like exploratory. And it's more like what a data scientist does than what like a traditional like hypothesis kind of building scientist does. So like the dollar amounts. So one of the key questions that we have in our minds when we set out to do this is like, you read the guidebook, there's all this lofty language about environmental justice. Okay, so are the dollar amounts for that environmental justice actually proportional to all the big talk? Meanwhile, we're still talking to all the people whose work touches each of these rows in the database and asking them things like, what do you know about how these agencies work? What kind of issues have they had in the past? What are the challenges to like making this dream a reality? What are
Mhm.
the supply chain issues, the worker issues? What are you worried about? Not to be negative, but there are a lot of challenges to spending this much money this fast.
And most of it has to be spent by 2026, 2027. So there is a real urgency, not only a climate change urgency, but there's a timeline on this money, and you can hear that in people's voices and words when we've talked to them about that sense of how quickly this needs to happen.
Yeah. Let's see, are we ready for another audience question?
We've got lots of great questions and statements that have come in, and I think my read is that we should go ahead and share some of the data visualization so we can really get into the reporting that we've done, and then hold some of this until we get to the Q&A, and we're just doing that.
And somebody says, we're trying to figure out what's out there and what strings are attached. Receiving federal funding is not easy. Yeah. That is a solid theme in what we heard.
Yes, yes.
So pots of money, should I take it away?
Yeah, do it.
Okay, so it might take me a second to just kind of, I have like a little laptop and like trying to get the screen, make sure I'm showing you the right thing. 1 second. Okay. Almost there. Yeah. Full screen.
Okay, nice.
All right. So this is the White House data that we collected. The stuff I said was pretty clean. So this is like the pots of money that Congress laid out in BIL and IRA. And I just wanted to give people a sense of how much money there is in here, because there's like tax credits in the bill. So there's some parts of those bills, you might see some numbers floating around that are kind of conflict with each other. But basically, there's $983 billion in federal spending programs. And the editorial choices that we made, we're looking at nature-related spending. We found at least 100+ billion. And this is, programs that will be spent nationally. So not all of this money is going to the Bay Area. You can see on the right here, the dark bubble in this little wad is the money that we care about. And then you can see that like the agencies that are getting the most money are the Department of Agriculture. A lot of it is for drought resilience, climate smart agriculture, stuff like that. Transportation, most of that is in BIL, and that is the infrastructure money. EPA is getting a boatload of money. The Army Corps of Engineers, which we will be very interested to see how that goes in our area. Department of Interior, which includes like the Forest Service, and the Bureau of Reclamation,
National Park Service, many
Park Service,
yeah. Bureau of Indian Affairs, lot there.
Interior is a big one, and then NOAA has gotten a huge amount of money that is really relevant to us because it's for resilient coastlines, and then Homeland Security has gotten about $4 billion. So then this bubble, this ridiculous ball pit here is just like the programs that we picked out that pertain to nature. So I just wanted to give you guys a sense of what was in here, because as I said, we're making these choices, like this is not like, this is a judgment call as to what to include here. So you got your clean water state revolving fund, you've got your money for conservation. If you mouse over these, and I encourage you to go and check out some of these programs, check out this data visualization online, you can mouse over it and see the description of what exactly is in here. And usually it'll give you a sense of why we included it. Occasionally the occasionally that is actually in the fine details of the eligibility. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff for wildfires, and there's a lot of stuff where it's
drought.
hard to kind of tell the difference between one program and another. So we are still learning about what these programs are and what they mean. And part of that is because the agencies are just in the process of defining the programs. And so like, if you know stuff about how these work, please help. But right now we're just like trying to get the big picture and sorting through the details. Yeah, it's a lot. Brownfields repair, like it's like every aspect of life that, every aspect of nature in the Bay Area, there's a little something for it in here.
Well, and that, just to circle back, part of the reason we're doing this is because, yes, this is a huge amount of money, but really addressing climate change is going to happen in this very widely dispersed way, right? That money is needed in all of these different places to really comprehensively address climate change. And here we are just looking at the nature-based solutions. We're not even talking about green energy and transportation. And so part of why it's so hard to track all this is because it's so diffuse, and we're trying to get people's attention to say this is happening. And what we heard in our reporting, there are people who are very aware that it's happening because they're applying, getting the money, trying to give the money out. And then other people who you'd think would know about it are still just saying like, wow, isn't that, aren't those bills actually just for like bridges? And so it's really, while we are getting up to speed, we are trying to bring the area along with us. I'm going to, let's see if I can share my screen here real quick. Hang on.
This will transition us from the nice, clean data that I got from the White House, which is hard enough to understand, to a much messier, real world kind of data, which is, how's the money actually being spent?
And so what we did, because Bay Nature, we care about Northern California, we really looked for projects that have been funded by BIL or IRA funds. And what we have here on this map and published in the summer issue is a selection. It is not everything that has been awarded. And the reason for that is there's several reasons for that. One is we really had to go to every agency and either talk to somebody, read through a lot of press releases. This information is not in some centralized location, let alone who's eligible to apply, when the next set of funding will be available to apply for. So we selected something that kind of shows the broad impacts so far. And you can see here, for example, interesting, the Presidio received $200 million in order to restore its, or basically replace its infrastructure. So its sewer, wastewater systems, and its electrical grid. So really interesting work is going to happen there over the next few years. Not sexy stuff, but the kind of stuff that is going to enable a national park to run off solar. Wildfire, there is everything. Again, you can see all this online, mouse through it, get more information. But the Forest Service in California has that's operating in California has received in excess of $400 million to address wildfire across various national forest lands. And we know that that's been an ongoing concern and issue in California. Bay Nature has certainly already done a lot of reporting more locally on various types of lands, but Forest Service controls a huge amount of the open space in the state. So them getting a handle on reducing wildfire risk is super important. This will be a big one that we follow, how that money is being spent. Another one that people in the Bay Area, long-standing projects that have been shovel ready for many years, is getting sediment that the Army Corps of Engineers scoops up as it's dredging the San Francisco Bay, parts of the Delta, and moving that sediment to wetlands that need it, as we are preparing for and spending a lot of money on projects for building out wetlands, preparing for sea level rise. There's been a situation for a long time where the Army Corps of Engineers is required to dispose of sediment in the least expensive way possible. That often includes taking the sediment and dumping it out in the Pacific, out beyond the Golden Gate. This money enables basically to make up the difference between the least expensive cost and what this will cost to dump some of that sediment at Cullinan Ranch, Montezuma Wetlands, and several other projects are supposed to be announced soon. There's a lot here, and I want to say that this map is even already out of date because this morning I was at a press conference with EPA Region 9. The San Francisco Bay Water Quality Improvement Fund is getting money through BIL, and announced a bunch of new projects this morning. For anybody who's really wonking out on this stuff, they announced $50 million worth of projects. A portion of that, 7 of those projects, are getting BIL money. There's a whole other story about funding going to EPA Region 9 and the San Francisco, what will be a San Francisco Bay office. So separate story, Bay Nature will follow. But so a bunch of those, that BIL money through that program, that existing fund, is specifically looking at underrepresented communities. And some of the projects that were announced today represent that. We will update this map soon to show those awards, and we will continue to update this map with other project awards. But some of the money is going to San Francisco Estuary Institute, which many of you listening probably know well. And they are, here's an example, a pass-through organization where some of that money they're giving to Urban Tilth, a nonprofit located in Richmond in the East Bay, to do creek green stormwater infrastructure management. So this money is going to seep out from aortas to capillaries. It's just going to reach into a lot of different areas, and that's part of what we want to capture and follow over the long term.
I just saw one of those SFEI grants also is for nutrient management, which is the kind of like the data filling in some of the data gaps on nutrient management, all the nutrients flowing into the bay. Like, it's supposed to be one of those things that can help prevent the next algae apocalypse as climate change increasingly affects our waters.
We'll stop sharing here. And so let's see. So we have given you a little overview here of the story that is in print, that is online, how we have gone about thinking about this information, and are really interested to hear, since this is the beginning of a long-term project, we're really interested to hear your feedback, what you need us to report on. What information do you need? So please go ahead and start putting your questions in the Q&A. And I'm going to take a second here to look at some of what's already come in. I wanted to respond directly to San Francisco Public Press, one of my favorite publications, nonprofit media organizations in the Bay Area, yes, we want to partner with other media organizations to really get this information out there and work collaboratively. That's what's great about nonprofit media.
Yeah, I mean, this is this is too big a pie for us to eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Michael Stoll, come at me.
Yeah, we're coming for you. All right. Let's see. I'm looking through some of the questions.
And just a reminder, like, I saw a couple of questions come in about where can I see these data visualizations. Just go to baynature.org/wildbillions, and that'll take you to the project page where you can see these visualizations and kind of sort through things at your leisure. In the future, I'm planning to put, like, I'm working on getting a story up that'll be like, how can I get my hands on this money? And maybe publishing something that's more like a list that includes things like eligibility that would probably pull from the White House data. But I'm not quite there yet, partly because we're like transitioning to a new fellow who will be doing that reporting. So that's part of our next steps, I guess. But before we get to the future,
we have some really meaty questions here. This is, it's hard to choose. Let's see. So Rebecca Johnson asks about Justice 40. One of the things I'm most interested in is the Justice 40 components of this work that ensures 40% of funds go to folks most impacted by environmental injustice. I've heard people talk about how this is an incredible form of reparations. I'd be curious to learn more about what you all heard and learned about this idea. You know, I will say I did not hear Justice 40 raised much in this context. I heard it, not that specifically, but definitely NOAA, EPA Region 9, and the EPA nationally, not just Region 9 by any stretch, are very focused on equity. That's pretty clear. And that is something that we intend to report on more. And I would say that some of those projects that were announced today represent some of that, but 40%, that we will have to connect the dots on that and see how some of this measures up. So thank you for that benchmark. That is one of our big questions, how to anybody receiving this money, and really the long-term question. It's one thing to get the money, it's hard to spend money well. So what are the metrics? How are people tracking that the money does what it's intended to do? Let's see.
Someone says, that's insane. They just dump valuable sediment.
Yes.
You know, what's insane is, like, it's been known about.
Repeat the
so
question
long.
so people know what you're talking about.
Someone just says, that's insane. They just dump valuable sediment.
Many people have made that observation.
There were many people, there were like 3 people in 1 week who basically pitched to me that sediment is sexy and we really need to write about it. So don't worry, we're going to write about sediment. Yeah, we've
drunk that Kool-Aid.
We believe.
Tremendous issues with labor, such as a backlog of work to do from appraisers to foresters, contractors, trail building. It's great to see a focus on funding for staff in agencies and also to support tribal projects. So yeah, what we certainly heard from people is a need to staff up, not only because during President Trump's era, with a lot of staff being cut, agencies gutted, so a lot of institutional knowledge lost, still trying to recover from that. But now there's even more work than before, and getting people trained up to do the work of reviewing project applications, of getting it out there. What we heard from the Department of Agriculture, which is getting for its NRCS department which is, got an order of $20 billion for agriculture that is thinking about climate change and particularly focused on soil health and how to help farmers do their work with climate in mind. That they really, that is one of their biggest issues. They need scientists, soil scientists, to consult with farmers and the recipients of their funds, and they are scrambling. So that is.
Yeah, I feel like when we talk to people, we heard about these very specific shortages, whether it's like agencies and their staff, or like, shortages of people who know how to plan ecological restorations, and like and there's like always a different reason for each one. This is not like it's not just one story. It's like lots of little or big stories. Like, there's shortage of planners because biologists we churn out lots of biologists, but we don't teach them how to do permitting. We don't teach them about the regulatory systems. There's a shortage of construction workers nationwide, which means that there's especially a shortage of construction workers who can do like those really who can kind of be balletic and nimble in special landscapes for restoration zones. And there's even a shortage of the native seeds that you need to plant stuff. So I think that we'll be teasing out a lot of that, but we are hearing a lot of those challenges on the supply side. They are many.
Yeah. The people to do the work and the materials, so to speak, to do the work.
Yeah, we also heard that it's, when you have a lot of money to spend, it's easier just to spend big chunks of money. Yeah. But the underserved communities often have very small community groups, and they may have smaller scale projects and be looking, first of all, they may not have the capacity to apply it. And second of all, they may have smaller projects. It's harder for agencies have to really do some work to make their process navigable, and the kinds of funding that they're offering usable for small organizations. Capacity seems to be a huge issue among the community organizations.
Nature in the City asks, relevant to this, about pass-through organizations, and it's clear that that is definitely some of this money will be handled that way. If you have a pass-through organization, let's say a recipient, like we mentioned earlier, the San Francisco Estuary Institute, which has the staff capacity to work with federal agencies to meet the many, many hurdles one needs to clear in order to receive federal funds. And, granted, these agencies know, that's what we heard anyway, from EPA. They know it's hard to get federal funds. It's hard for smaller groups. So that there is an intention for pass-through organizations, and that's something we really hope to report on. Things to come.
Yeah. And one of the things that we want to keep an eye on as we go forward is what does it mean to hold these public agencies accountable? Public agencies have a responsibility to be transparent. They have a responsibility to give us documents and answer our questions and things like that. But some of them are pretty much black boxes, and even for potential applicants can be really hard to get information out of. One thing that we're really interested in is how these agencies define the success. What does it mean for this money to be transformational? Is it going to be defined in some way that we can actually measure and track? We haven't seen what those success metrics look like yet. And when we've talked to the agencies, they're kind of yeah, we're trying to put the funding programs together. And they're also trying to balance the need to be transparent and create measurable measurable outcomes, with not putting too much of a burden on the grant applicants. So respect that that is a hard challenge, but we are also going to we're really looking forward to seeing how that plays out. And some agencies, again, just have a much better track record at this than others.
Yeah. Someone asked if we would be looking at the Forest Service and their wildfire mitigation. We will.
Yes.
Somebody else here has asked about, Heather Anderson says, I would like to know about any funds that might apply to native plant conservation through collection and seed banking rather than restoration. And we did see that the National Park Service has received funds for that through BIL, and go on the website and you can see a little bit more about that, that there is money for both of those things that you're talking about, not just the restoration, but, and that is really about, I think in part trying to keep up with the need for the native plants to restore places that will be receiving funding for the restoration piece. Kimberly Martin asks, are there known entities that are in the business of designing metrics to determine success and communicate among funding recipients, exchange best practices?
I don't know, but that's a good question. I know that like one of the sources we talked to is like in the wetland mitigation business, and his take was basically like, you know, let's see the numbers, let's see this, let's see. I don't want to see progress toward like vague progress toward a goal. I want to see like how many acres did you restore? Because the wetland mitigation is this kind of corner of federal law that is pretty clearly defined. If you like, you know, develop 1 acre, you have to like mitigate that with 1 acre, and then like there's all these rules as for what that means and that it has to be done in perpetuity and stuff like that. So he considered it this kind of like corner of better defined accountability than some other areas of the federal landscape. And I, you know, that is just one take on it, but it is, you know, it's a way to think about success metrics, at least counting acres.
I wanted to address a couple of earlier questions from Sierra Hellman and Sarah Miller. They're asking about funding for schools and environmental education. What I did see this morning at this press conference with EPA Region 9 is among the project that they announced today, quite a lot of it was directly for schools and environmental education. So it is pretty interesting to see that they're taking that approach. And I really encourage you to Google that a little bit today, because there was a lot of press there. And while we don't have an article about it or anything, we will put those projects on our map in the future. And I do know that the press conference got some other coverage. So please look for that. Let's see. Let's say from Beth, from a 10,000 foot view, does the wildfire risk reduction funding look like it'll be sufficient to cope with the ever worsening wildfire risk to the state? I would say no. I would say this is a beginning, but there's a ways to go. So
yeah, we have a few different questions about wildfire mitigation, and I think that, you know, the Forest Service funds, as far as we understand them so far, are just really not well defined in the law. And the Forest Service is one of the agencies that we don't understand the inner workings of as well as some other ones. So we are going to have a look at that. And if you know people we should talk to, please suggest them.
Yeah. An anonymous attendee says, how are the recipients chosen? So much of this money from BIL and IRA are competitive grants. So these are federal agencies saying applications are open, submit your application for funding. And then, you know, every agency is going to have different criteria for who is eligible, what it means to be eligible, and then probably have to choose between a lot of good candidates. So that is a a good question with very situation specific answers, and that we realize that is, we're thinking about how can Bay Nature help people get some of that information. If nothing else, just where can we point you to get information? So we look forward to your feedback and thoughts on whether that would be helpful. And, we can do it to a degree, but we're thinking a lot about that as we build out our website platform, where we're going to be presenting or sort of holding resources for the community, the stories that we've published, the ongoing updated data visualization. So we are closing in here. Don't know. Let me see if we can get one more. Let's see.
I want to reiterate that if you have questions, tips, people you think we should talk to, you are one of those people, or just something that you want to know, please email us at wildbillions@baynature.org. We're hiring a young journalist who will be working just on this for the next year, for the most part. And I need to give them some good stories to work on. So write to me.
Okay, I think with that, I'm going to answer one more question from Ildiko. Is money going to state agencies and then dispersed by them? In some cases, and it depends on the agency and that particular pot of money. So sometimes yes, sometimes it is going to be from federal agencies directly. So with that, thank you everybody for showing up today and listening and helping us get this project underway and being generous with your comments and thoughts. We look forward to more of them. This talk will be sent to anybody who signed up for the talk. We have your email address. We'll send you a link to it. And then it will also end up on the Bay Nature website, baynature.org, by the end of the week. And that is there for free for anybody to access and rewatch if they want and share. So again, wildbillions@baynature.org. Please send us your thoughts, comments, questions, tips. And this is just the beginning. So we look forward to continuing the conversation in the future. And thanks very much for showing up today.
Thanks for being here, and thanks for all of your great questions and comments. I'm really looking forward to looking through them more later.
Take care. Bye.